The air in Granddad Ethan's cavernous library, usually thick with the scent of aged leather and pipe smoke, felt suddenly thin, suffocating, like someone had sucked all the oxygen out along with the warmth. He stood before the roaring fireplace, back impossibly straight, despite his 80 years, silhouetted against the flames. His usual aura of quiet command, the kind that could silence a boardroom or a boisterous family dinner with a single lifted eyebrow, was fractured. Something brittle lingered beneath the surface. We were all there, Uncle Roger nervously polishing his Rolex, Aunt Lydia fussing with her oversized pearls, my cousins Jessica and Brad whispering near the wet bar, Mom looking pale and drawn beside Dad, who kept clearing his throat. Even Great-Aunt Mildred, usually tucked away in the east wing, was perched on the edge of a Chippendale chair, her knuckles white on her cane. The summons had been urgent, cryptic, family meeting, library. Now, Grandad didn't turn around immediately. He just stared into the fire, the flames dancing reflections in his still sharp blue eyes. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the crackle of burning logs and the nervous tap of Brad's foot against the priceless Persian rug. I leaned against a bookshelf, a knot of unease tightening in my gut. This wasn't the pre-Christmas gathering vibe. This felt like an execution. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, gravelly, stripped of its usual warmth. It carried across the room, silencing even Brad's restless foot. Sit down. It wasn't a request. Chairs scraped, bodies settled. He still faced the fire. I've called you all here, he began, his shoulders slumping almost imperceptibly, a gesture so alien on his normally rigid frame it sent a chill down my spine. Because there's no easy way to say this. I have failed. He paused, letting the word hang. Failed. Ethan Caldwell didn't fail. He conquered. Built an empire from scratch. Weathered recessions. Outmaneuvered rivals. Failure wasn't in his vocabulary. Failed. Uncle Roger blurted, half rising. What do you mean, failed? Grandad turned then. Slowly. The firelight carved deep shadows into his face, making him look every one of his 80 years, and then some. The vibrant, shrewd businessman was gone. In his place stood a man diminished, haunted. My breath hitched. It was an act, I'd learn later, honed with terrifying precision. But in that moment, it was utterly, devastatingly convincing. My investment, he rasped, his gaze sweeping over us, lingering nowhere and everywhere at once. The one I told some of you about, the Zenith Venture Capital Fund, had mentioned it months ago, offhandedly, over brandy new, exciting frontier, revolutionary tech, guaranteed returns, had spoken with his usual quiet confidence. It wasn't what it seemed. A Ponzi scheme, a sophisticated one, but rotten to the core. He swallowed hard, the sound audible in the tomb-like silence. I invested everything. The gasp was collective. Aunt Lydia's hand flew to her pearls. Everything. Ethan. What do you mean everything? Everything. Lydie, he said, his voice cracking on the nickname he hadn't used for her since they were children. The liquid assets, the stocks, the bonds, leveraged against the house, against Caldwell Industries. He named his crown jewel, the manufacturing conglomerate that bore our name, that employed half the town. That was the bedrock of our family's wealth and identity. The room erupted. Leveraged the house. Jessica shrieked, her voice shrill. This house. She gestured wildly at the mahogany paneling, the soaring ceilings, the centuries-old artwork. Caldwell Industries. Uncle Roger roared, surging to his feet, his face purpling. You gambled the company, our legacy, my position, my son's future. He jabbed a finger towards Brad, who looked suddenly very young and very scared. Dad just buried his face in his hands. Mom reached for him, her own face a mask of shock. Ethan, Dad, how could you? She whispered, the hurt roar in her voice. Grandad flinched as if struck. He held up a trembling hand, a plea for quiet that barely registered. I was assured I was blinded by the potential returns. Greedy, stupid, an old fool who thought he still had the magic touch. He sank into his high-backed leather chair, the throne from which had ruled our family for decades, looking utterly defeated. The fund collapsed last week. The SEC is involved. The creditors they're circling. They'll take it all. The house. The company. Everything. The pronouncement landed like a bomb. Panic set in. Ugly and immediate. It wasn't grief for him, for his loss. It was terror for their loss. What about the trust funds? Aunt Lydia demanded, her voice sharp. The ones for the grandchildren. Granddad shook his head slowly, his eyes downcast. Leveraged. Collateral. Gone. Brad let out a choked sob. Jessica looked like she might be sick. Uncle Roger started pacing, muttering about lawyers, about incompetence, about betrayal. Great Aunt Mildred just stared into the distance, her lips moving silently. What happens to us? Roger whirled on Granddad. My house, my cars, the club membership. It's all tied to the company. To you. I don't know, Roger. Granddad whispered, the picture of broken despair. I truly don't know. There might be pennies on the dollar. After the debts, it will take years to untangle. Years of litigation. Public humiliation. He looked around the room, his gaze finally landing on me. I was frozen, trying to process the sheer magnitude of the collapse. I am so very sorry, he said, his voice thick with unched tears that looked terrifyingly real. It failed you all. I've destroyed everything I built. Everything your grandmother and I. He trailed off, unable to finish, a masterstroke of emotional manipulation that punched me right in the chest, even as my analytical mind screamed that something felt off. The next few hours were a blur of escalating hysteria. Accusations flew. Tears mostly of self-pity flowed. Plans were hatched and discarded. Lawyers were called. Financial advisors summoned. Through it all, Granddad sat slumped in his chair, a broken king, answering questions in monosyllables, radiating a profound, weary shame. He looked smaller, frailer than I'd ever seen him. I stayed mostly silent, watching my family unravel, watching the mask slip, the genuine concern on Mom's face as she brought Granddad a glass of water, her hand trembling, the dazed horror on Dad's, and then the others, Roger's barely contained rage, Lydia's frantic calculations about her lifestyle, Jessica's tearful lament about her upcoming wedding at the country club. Where will we have it now? Brad's sullen withdrawal. Eventually, the initial storm subsided into a tense, icy calm. People drifted away, muttering about needing to call their lawyers to secure their assets. Uncle Roger was the last to leave, pausing at the library door. He didn't look at Granddad. I'll be in touch, Father. He spat the word, once have spoken to legal. We'll salvage what we can, for the family name. He slammed the door behind him. The silence that followed was profound. Only the crackling fire remained. Granddad didn't move. I walked over slowly, unsure what to say. Granddad, I started, my voice rough. He lifted his head. The utter devastation was still etched on his face, but for a fleeting second, as his eyes met mine, I saw something else. A flicker, hard, calculating. Then it was gone, swallowed by the abject misery. Mark, he sighed, my name heavy on his lips. I'm so sorry, son. Sorry you had to see that. Sorry for all of it. Are you okay? It was a stupid question, but the only one I could manage. He gave a weak, hollow laugh. Okay. No, Mark, I am very far from okay. I've lost everything. My wealth, my company, he gestured vaguely towards the door where Roger had exited. Respect. My family's future. He looked down at his hands, gnarled with age, but still strong. All that remains is this old house, for now, and a mountain of shame. I pulled up a footstool beside his chair. What happens next? Next, he sighed again. A long, rattling sound. The vultures descend. The lawyers pick the bones. I'll be evicted from my own home soon enough. Sold to pay debts. He looked around the library, his gaze lingering on the portraits of stern-faced Caldwell ancestors. Perhaps it's fitting. End where it began, in ruin. Where will you go? The thought of Granddad, the Titan, homeless, was unthinkable. He shrugged, a gesture of utter hopelessness. A small apartment, perhaps, if there's anything left after the fire sale. Or he trailed off, leaving the unspoken possibility, hanging state care, charity. It was designed to provoke maximum horror, and it worked. My throat tightened. "Don't be ridiculous," I said, the words coming out firmer than I intended. "You'll come stay with me and Sarah." Sarah, my wife, was pregnant with our first child. Our apartment was small, cramped even for two, soon to be three. But the alternative, unacceptable. Granddad's head snapped up, genuine surprise flashing in his eyes this time. Not the act, real shock. "Mark, no, I couldn't impose. Not now. With the baby coming, Sarah would kill me if I suggested otherwise," I said, forcing a small smile. "It's tight, but it's a roof. We'll manage." It sounded insane even as I said it. Granddad Ethan Caldwell, crammed into our two-bedroom apartment above the Thai place. But the look in his eyes, that fleeting flicker of surprise mixed with something else, gratitude, solidified my resolve. He reached out a trembling hand and placed it over mine. His skin felt papery, cold. "You're a good boy, Mark," he murmured, his voice thick. "Like your mother. Loyal." He squeezed my hand, a surprisingly strong grip belying his apparent frailty. "Thank you." The next few weeks were a descent into a bizarre, public purgatory. The news of Granddad Ethan's spectacular downfall spread through our affluent town like wildfire. The Caldwell name, once synonymous with power and philanthropy, became a punchline, a cautionary tale whispered over golf carts and charity luncheons. Reporters camped outside the gates of the estate, soon to be repossessed. Creditors' letters arrived daily, thick, official envelopes that Granddad would just toss, unopened, onto a growing pile in the grand foyer. The family fracture lines deepened rapidly. Uncle Roger and Aunt Lydia were the first to publicly distance themselves. Roger gave a cringe-worthy interview to the business section, portraying himself as a victim of misplaced trust, hinting at his own financial peril, while subtly positioning himself as a potential savior for whatever scraps of Caldwell Industries might remain. He moved his family into a slightly less ostentatious, but still multi-million-dollar house across town, funded, he claimed, by prudent, separate investments. Lydia stopped taking calls from Mom and me entirely. Their Christmas card list, I imagined, was undergoing severe edits. Jessica's fiancé, a hedge fund manager whose interests seemed directly proportional to the Caldwell fortune, abruptly needed space and flew to Aspen. Jessica, devastated and furious, blamed Granddad entirely, unleashing vitriolic tirades over the phone to anyone who would listen, including Mom. She moved back in with Roger and Lydia, becoming a ghost in their new mansion, her lavish wedding plans scrapped. Brad, adrift without the guaranteed trust fund safety net, got caught selling prescription pills, head lifted from Roger's medicine cabinet. The scandal made the local news, another black mark on the tarnished Caldwell name. Roger disowned him, publicly. Brad vanished, rumored to be couch surfing somewhere out west. Great Aunt Mildred, surprisingly, was the only one besides Mom and me who showed any semblance of concern for Granddad himself. She didn't have much, a modest pension, her little cottage on the edge of the estate grounds, but she'd call him daily, offering simple things, a casserole, a ride to the doctor he refused, claiming he couldn't afford it. Companionship. She saw through the performance. Or was she just inherently kind? I wasn't sure. Moving Granddad out of the manor was a surreal, heartbreaking spectacle. Watching the movers hired with the last dregs of his supposed accessible cash pack of 80 years of life into cardboard boxes felt like witnessing an autopsy. He insisted on taking very little, a few clothes, some books, his favorite pipe, a small, worn leather case he kept locked, and a single, unremarkable-looking landscape painting that had hung in his study for as long as I could remember. Sentimental value, Head mumbled when I asked about it. Everything else, the antiques, the art, the silver, was tagged for auction. Seeing him standing in the cavernous, echoing foyer for the last time, a single suitcase at his feet, dwarfed by the space head once filled with such authority, was almost more than I could bear. The act was so convincing, the degradation so complete, that even my lingering doubts were drowned in a wave of pity. He looked like a ghost haunting his own life. Our apartment was chaos. Sarah, bless her, embraced the insanity with saintly patience, though the strain showed in the dark circles under her eyes. Granddad's presence was large. His quiet dignity in the face of utter ruin was both admirable and oppressive. He insisted on contributing, taking over small chores with meticulous care. But his world had shrunk from boardrooms and golf courses to our tiny living room and the local park bench. He'd sit 4 hours, staring out the window, lost in thought, radiating a melancholy so deep it permeated the walls. Conversations revolved around bills, doctor's appointments, he claimed various minor, stress-related ailments, the baby's impending arrival, and the slow, grinding progress of the bankruptcy proceedings, a narrative he carefully controlled through hushed phone calls with a single, perpetually grim-sounding lawyer named Mr. Armitage. Mom visited constantly. She was his rock. While Dad retreated into work and a kind of shell-shocked silence, Mom was there, bringing groceries, doing Granddad's laundry, listening patiently to his murmured regrets, his fears about the future. She shielded him fiercely from the ugliness emanating from Roger and Lydia, intercepting their rare, accusatory calls. I saw the toll it took on her. Her inheritance, modest but secure, was also tied up in the supposed collapse. She and Dad quietly downsized, selling their boat, putting their dream lake house renovation on indefinite hold. They never complained to Granddad, not once. Meanwhile, the loyal family members suffered tangible losses. Sarah and I drained our savings, trying to cover the increased costs of having Granddad with us, plus preparing for the baby. All while my freelance graphic design work hit a dry patch. We ate cheap pasta, skipped movies, fretted over the cost of diapers. Mom sold jewelry shed, inherited from grandma pieces she loved, just to make ends meet after Dad's bonus got slashed due to the Caldwell uncertainty impacting his firm's association. And Mildred quietly sold some of her own precious antiques, leaving her cottage looking barer, and started using coupons at the grocery store. We didn't discuss it openly. This shared, quiet sacrifice, it was just what you did for family. The contrast with Roger's side was galling. Pictures surfaced on social media. Roger and Lydia skiing in Gestad needed to clear our heads after the family ordeal. Jessica posing with a new BMW, Daddy's early birthday present since the trust is gone. Brad resurfaced briefly, hitting up Mom for money via a pleading email, claiming rehab. She sent him a small amount, against Dad's advice. Their detachment was absolute, their contempt for Granddad palpable. Roger even tried to sue, contesting the bankruptcy proceedings, claiming Granddad had hidden assets, a move that caused Granddad immense distress. Another call to the grim Mr. Armitage, but ultimately went nowhere, dismissed for lack of evidence. It felt like salt in an open wound. Granddad watched it all unfold with an eerie stillness. He'd listened silently as Mom recounted Roger's latest outrage or Lydia's cutting remark. He'd see Jessica's Instagram posts on Sarah's phone. A shadow would pass over his face, a tightening around his eyes, but he'd just nod slowly, murmuring, "I see," or "let them be." The fire, I remembered, the righteous anger, seemed utterly extinguished, replaced by a weary resignation that broke my heart anew every time. He played the broken patriarch to perfection. The only time I saw a spark, a glimpse of the old Granddad, was when Sarah's pregnancy progressed. He'd sit beside her on our worn sofa, his large, veined hand gently resting on her swollen belly, a look of profound wonder softening the lines of grief on his face. He'd tell her stories about when Mom was pregnant with me, his voice regaining a hint of warmth. He started meticulously carving a small wooden rattle, his hands surprisingly steady. "For the little one," he'd say softly. It was the one thing that seemed to pierce the fog of his performance, a genuine connection. Months bled into a year. The baby arrived, a beautiful, healthy girl we named Eleanor, after Grandma. Granddad held her in the hospital room, tears welling in his eyes, real tears this time. I was certain. "She's perfect," he whispered, his voice thick. "Just perfect." For a moment, the weight of the charade seemed to lift. He was just a grandfather, holding his great-granddaughter. Life settled into a new, strained normalcy. Granddad, Sarah, Eleanor, and I coexisted in our cramped space, The bankruptcy proceedings dragged on, a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety fueled by Mr. Armitage's periodic, doom-laden updates. Roger's side of the family became distant ghosts, mentioned only with sighs or headshakes. Mom and Aunt Mildred were our lifelines. Then, shortly after Eleanor's first birthday, Granddad caught a bad chest infection. It wasn't life-threatening, the doctor assured us, but at his age, it hit him hard. He was weak, feverish, confined to the pull-out sofa bed in our living room for weeks. Mom practically moved in, helping Sarah care for him and Eleanor. I remember sitting by his bedside late one night, the apartment quiet except for his labored breathing and the soft gurgle of the humidifier. He looked terribly frail, his skin translucent under the lamplight. The act felt terrifyingly real now. What if this was it? What if he died amidst this lie, with half his family estranged? Believing head died a broken, bankrupt failure. He stirred, his eyes fluttering open. They were clear, lucid, fixed on me. "Mark," he rasped. "Yeah, Granddad. Need some water." He shook his head weakly. His hand fumbled under his pillow, emerging with a small, ornate key he'd never seen before. It looked old, heavy, made of tarnished silver. "My study back at the house before they sealed it for auction," he whispered, each word an effort. "The landscape painting, the one I took, the one over your old desk?" I asked, confused. He nodded, closing his eyes for a moment, gathering strength. Behind it a panel, slides open. "This key," he pressed the cold metal into my palm, curling my fingers around it. His grip was weak, but insistent. "Take it. Tomorrow. Before the auctioneers strip everything. What's behind it belongs to," he coughed. A harsh, racking sound. "To the loyal ones. You, your mother, Mildred, Sarah and the baby. Understand?" My mind raced. Behind the painting, what could possibly be there? Some sentimental trinket? A hidden will? It felt like the fever talking. A final, desperate gesture. "Okay, Granddad," I said soothingly, humoring him. "I understand. I'll get it. Rest now." He searched my face, his gaze surprisingly sharp again. "Promise me, Mark, don't tell anyone. Not yet. Especially not Roger." His voice held a sudden, cold intensity that cut through the fever haze. A chill ran down my spine. That flicker again. Hard. "Calculating. I promise," I said, the words tasting strange. He sank back, seemingly satisfied, his eyes closing. "Good boy," he murmured, drifting back into sleep. The loyal ones the next morning, he seemed a little better, the fever breaking. He insisted he was fine, urging me to go, to fulfill my promise before the auction house crew descended. Mom arrived to help Sarah, looking worried but resigned. "Hay's been muttering about that painting all night," she sighed. "Fever dream, probably." But the key felt heavy in my pocket, that intense look in his eyes. It wasn't delirium. There was purpose there, cold, deliberate purpose. Gaining access to the manor wasn't easy. It was under the control of the bankruptcy trustees, secured. I had to call Mr. Armitage, using Granddad's name, spinning a story about retrieving a single, specific item of no monetary value, immense sentimental importance that Granddad desperately wanted. Armitage, sounding as grim and unsurprised as ever, made a call. An hour later, a bored security guard met me at the gate, checked my ID, and let me in with a warning. 10 minutes. Don't touch anything else. Place is inventoried. Walking through the grand, empty halls felt like trespassing in a tomb. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light piercing the boarded-up windows. The silence was absolute, oppressive. My footsteps echoed unnervingly. The library, once Granddad's sanctuary, was stripped bare, shelves empty, the massive desk gone. Only faint impressions on the carpet remained. His study felt even smaller without his imposing presence. The walls were bare except for the ghostly outlines of where paintings had hung. Except for one. The landscape. It was smaller than I remembered, unremarkable. A muddy river bank under a grey sky, framed in simple, dark wood. Granddad had insisted on taking it, called it sentimental. "Why this one?" Heart pounding. I lifted it off the wall. It was heavier than expected. Behind it, the wallpaper was faded but intact. I ran my fingers over the surface. Nothing. No obvious panel. Had the fever dream been just that? Then my fingers caught on an almost imperceptible ridge near the baseboard. I pressed. Nothing. I slid my fingernail along it. With a soft snick, a small, rectangular section of the wall, about the size of a large book, slid sideways, revealing a dark cavity. Inside was not a trinket, not a will. It was a metal safe. Small, heavy, gunmetal grey, utterly modern and out of place in the old wall. There was a keyhole, and above it, a digital keypad. The key Grandad gave me fit perfectly into the keyhole. It turned with a smooth, well-oiled clunk. But the keypad, he hadn't given me a code. Panic flared. Had he forgotten? Was this part of the delusion? I stared at the blank, green-lit screen. What could the code be? Grandma's birthday. His birthday. The company founding date. I tried them all. Nothing. Access denied. Frustration mounted. Time was ticking. The security guard would be back. I thought of Grandad's intense gaze, his words, the lawyer ones. Then it clicked. Not a date. A concept. A test. My fingers trembled as I typed 8 letters. LOYLTY. A soft beep. The green light turned steady. I gripped the handle and pulled. The safe door swung open silently. Inside wasn't stacks of cash or gold bars. It was neater, colder. Bundles of documents. A single, sleek black USB drive. And on top, a thick, creamy envelope addressed in Grandad's precise handwriting, for Mark, to be opened after retrieval. Hands shaking, I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of heavy bond paper. Grandad's familiar script flowed across it. Mark, if you're reading this, you kept your promise. Loyalty, the rarest currency, and the only one that matters. What you are about to discover is the truth. The bankruptcy, the loss, it was a fabrication, a test. Zenith Venture Capital was real, but my investment was minimal and entirely recovered months before the supposed collapse. Caldwell Industries was never leveraged. The house was never truly at risk. Mr. Armitage is not a bankruptcy lawyer. He is my most trusted security consultant and theatrical director. I orchestrated it all. Every detail. The whispers, the staged losses, the public humiliation. I needed to see, needed to know who we truly are. Who would stand by me not because of the wealth, the power, the Caldwell name, but because I am Ethan. Just a man. A flawed old man. What you see around you in this empty house is the stage set. The reality is contained in these documents. And on that drive. They prove my complete solvency. More than solvency. My wealth has grown significantly, diversified globally, utterly untouchable by the creditors' actors, paid well for their roles. The wealth is real, Mark, immensely real, but it belongs only to those who prove their loyalty when the stage lights dimmed and the set crumbled. To you, to your mother, to dear, steadfast Mildred, to Sarah, who welcomed a broken old man into her home, to little Eleanor, who deserves a future unburdened by the vultures. Roger, Lydia, Jessica, Brad, they chose their path. They revealed their true measure in the face of perceived poverty. They deserve the destitution they so feared, the one they so hastily fled. They get nothing, less than nothing. The legal documents here ensure any future claims they might dream up are null and void. Armitage has already initiated the process to dissolve the bankruptcy farce, revealing my solvency, but isolating the assets designated for the dissoil. Their public humiliation will be complete, a mirror held up to their own greed. You will find instructions for accessing the funds, the trusts established for each of you, the deeds to properties held in your names, including this house, which is, and always was, fully paid for. There is enough for generations, managed responsibly, to live lives of purpose, not just privilege. Do not feel pity for the others. They made their choices. Revenge is a dish best served after meticulous preparation, and mine is now complete. This is justice, Mark. Poetic justice. I am tired. The performance has taken its toll. though seeing your kindness, your mother's unwavering support, Mildred's quiet decency, Sarah's strength, and little Ellie's smile, that was the only real reward I sought. That was the treasure. Guide the family now. Mark, the real family. Build something lasting, not just on money, but on the loyalty you've shown. That is the true Caldwell legacy. With immense gratitude and love, Granddad P.S. Burn this letter once read. Armitage will handle the rest. I stood there, in the empty study, the letter trembling in my hand, the safe open before me like a Pandora's box filled with cold, hard vengeance and unimaginable wealth. The air felt thick, charged. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was roaring. Every interaction, every tear, every sacrifice, every betrayal over the past year replayed in my mind with horrifying clarity. It wasn't misfortune, it was a meticulously crafted drama, and we, the loyal ones, had been unwitting players in Grandad's final, devastating masterpiece. The scale of the deception was staggering. The ruthlessness of it took my breath away. Loyalty. Head called it the rarest currency. Head paid us back with a king's ransom, funded by the utter ruin of his own son, his granddaughter, his nephew. Was it justice? Or was it the act of a man who, in testing others, had revealed a chilling capacity for cruelty within himself? The key felt cold in my hand. The letter, a confession and a commandment. The safe held not just wealth, but the irrevocable shattering of our family, orchestrated by the man I thought I knew. Granddad Ethan hadn't just tested loyalty, he had forged our futures in the fire of his own ruthless design. And the weight of it, the sheer, terrifying magnitude of his revenge and his reward, settled upon my shoulders like lead. The game was over. The consequences were just beginning, and I was holding the keys to a fortune built on ashes.